Welcome to Talking Digital Academy, the audio format for the Digital Academy conference organized by Bielefeld University. The Digital Academy is an annual online workshop dedicated to current questions in digital humanities research. This year's theme is Building Workflows in the Digital Humanities. The workshop focuses on how digital research processes are planned, carried out and reflected upon, from the handling of data to the question of how research can remain transparent and reusable over time. Over the course of the workshop, participants explored what it means to build reliable workflows for scholarly practice. They discussed not only technical solutions, but also the methodological choices behind them. How data is prepared, how tools shape research, and how digital projects can be made sustainable beyond their immediate context. For a deeper dive into these questions, the final day of the workshop was organized as an open space day. There, experts from the field shared their perspectives on digital workflows and reflected on their own research practice. These expert interviews form the basis for the 3 podcast episodes on this channel. Our host for this podcast is Silke Schwand, Professor of Digital History at Bielefeld University. Her second guest at today's Open Space Day is Jonathan Geiger from the University of Mainz.
I'm really happy to welcome Jonathan Geiger, who joins us from yet another Digital Academy, which is the Digital Academy at the Academy of Sciences and Literature in Mainz, which is, I think, a pretty coincidence in this case. So happy to have you with us, Jonathan, especially because you have a very particular and very different background from our first expert today. You come from both information science and philosophy, which I think is an interesting combination for the field of digital humanities and also for questions of knowledge management, project management, and sort of the interlinking of information organization, but also but also theoretical and epistemological questions, philosophical thinking about what knowledge actually is, how it can be reproduced, organized, and so on. You also work on search engines, data, code, information, anything really related to digital humanities, and you are one of the co-conveners of the Digital Humanities in the German-speaking country working group on theory of DH, which is, I think, also a very important context for the digital humanities in general, but maybe also for the questions of how do you organize sort of theoretical perspectives, practical questions, methodologies within workflows. Possibly. So thank you again for joining us today, Jonathan. I'm really happy to see you and to speak to you. Welcome.
Thank you too. Thank you very much for inviting me, for having me here. I'm very honored and I'm looking very much forward for this conversation and the discussion.
Thank you. Yes, so we kick off this conversation with a very general question. So I did a short introduction of your fields of specialization, but maybe you would like to sort of highlight some aspects also that relate to your personal interests and also your experience in the field with our questions of building workflows for the digital humanities. So maybe you could start off with telling us a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, I can do that. Thank you very much. And you already said a lot of things about me and my background. So I just have to think what would be new and interesting for this context. I think there are 2 points in particular. The first one is I work at the Academy of Science and Literature, and here especially in infrastructure projects. So at the Academy, especially the apartment of the Digital Academy, where we do the digital humanities kind of work, is more about building up digital workflows for research projects, but also digital research infrastructures for especially the humanities. We have the NFDI for Culture project there, so the consortium for the National Research Data Infrastructure for the material and immaterial cultural data, so art history and architecture and music and stuff like that. So we're building this infrastructure. We have some other infrastructural projects there. I'm also concerned with the DALIA project, which is about data literacy and open educational resources. I don't know how important that is for this particular situation. And the other thing I'd like to point out, or which could be of interest, is that I'm also a member of the GFWM, Gesellschaft für Wissensmanagement, so the German-speaking Society for Knowledge Management. That is not primarily an academic network, but they are the practitioners. So they work in big corporations. They work in all kinds of institutions, and they are developing knowledge management methods and tools, and they are exchanging their ideas and so on. And there is not so much overlap to the academic world. So even the term knowledge management is actually pretty rare in our domains. Yes, and we have a working group there which deals with questions: how can we bridge this gap between the knowledge management community and the scientific community? I think these are, yes, the 2 points which make sense to add at that point.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think it makes a lot of sense that we maybe later on also talk a little bit more about infrastructure, because, you know, building workflows kind of needs infrastructures, or maybe is, you know, infrastructure is sort of an outcome of thinking about workflows and the necessities of sort of resources and resource management. And also knowledge management, I think, especially since you already hinted at there might be sort of different concepts around that people think about when they hear knowledge management, could also be, I think, an interesting point, because in the first interview you talked lots about project management and how does that, well, maybe we can start with this kind of question. What would be your take on the differences between project management and knowledge management? Or if I rephrase, what is it that knowledge management is all about?
Yes, that's a pretty big question. So I'd say the connections are pretty big, actually. So I mean, it depends on the terms you're using, right? So if you say project management, and if you understand project management as a systematic way of managing finite resources to reach a defined goal, then the question is what kind of resources you have to structure in this process. And we can understand knowledge, skills, and information as one of these resources. So if we talk about knowledge management, we can say, okay, this is the systematic management of these particular resources. It means knowledge, information, and even communication and skills. We can say we have different levels here. So there's personal, the so-called personal knowledge management, which is about the individual. We have an institutional knowledge management, which is obviously about the institution. And we have projects, of course. In practice, these areas are overlapping. I think for the resource, or if we think about knowledge as a resource, there is one differentiation very crucial, and that is the differentiation between the implicit and the explicit knowledge. This goes back to the literature sites, usually Michael Polanyi, personal knowledge, or the implicit dimension. And the idea is, okay, we have means of making some things explicit. We can write something down. We can have symbolic representations of something, right? But that doesn't exhaust what we can do or what we know. If we think about knowledge from experiences, or if we think about knowledge when it comes to movement or something like that, one of the classical examples is how to ride a bike. You can explain this to people, but it doesn't matter how exact you explain it. People cannot ride a bike if you just explain it to them this way. They have to try it. So we have this implicit dimension, which can just partially be explicit. And this is for the management of these skills, like I said, a very crucial differentiation. Practically, knowledge management has also some tools and methods to organize these kinds of resources. When it comes to project management, there are you can split it up regarding the different phases of a project, the very beginning, the project in its duration, and towards the end, or even after the end. And obviously you need skills and knowledge and information all over the place. You need people who know how to resolve the tasks which are dedicated to them. You make experiences when you work in a project which could be valuable for the next project. So this is where these different areas, personal knowledge management, institutional, and project on knowledge management in projects overlap, because if a project ends, a lot of the times, if the people leave the project, there's a lot of knowledge lost. But if you have a systematic knowledge management in your institution where the project was situated at, then you can preserve some of this knowledge and can transport it to the next project and so on. So the short answer would be project management and knowledge management are deeply intertwined. If you like, maybe later in the discussion, I can give you some more concrete examples, what we, for example, do in NFDI for culture, because we have some knowledge management methods there as well.
Okay, thank you. That is really interesting and kind of got me thinking quite a bit about the differentiation, but also maybe the parallels that you pointed out. So turning back to the workflows, I would expect that workflows play a role both in project management and in knowledge management, I guess. So could you tell us a little bit about the kinds of workflows that you maybe use yourselves? Is that something that you could describe? And maybe give us an overview of the things that worked well or that maybe didn't work so well?
Yes. I'm not quite sure, especially regarding the first expert interview. Have you clarified on the term of workflow?
No.
That point?
Please
Okay.
do.
I don't have
what we did.
answer, but...
What we did was state that it is a broad term that can sort of mean lots of different things. So it would be really helpful if you could sort of lead with, this is my understanding of workflow, and this is, where I, how I use it and what I understand. That would be really helpful. Yes.
Yeah. So when I thought about it, okay, so I had this very intuitive understanding. You have a big task and you slice it up into smaller parts, which could be done on its own and so on, which is actually an idea going back to Descartes, who said in his Discours de la méthode, if you have a huge problem, then slice it into smaller pieces. But I do also think, and maybe this is a nice metaphor in the digital humanities as well, you can think about it, workflows like in the terms of an algorithm. I mean, it has to be standardized, it has some imperatives, it is explicit, it is symbolic, it is general, it is task-oriented, and so on. So maybe this makes sense. And if we think about it that way, we have workflows all the time. Even if I pull up my laptop, a lot of things I don't have to think about because it's a standardized workflow. I haven't documented that because I think usually the explicitness, and then we have this part of explicit knowledge, and the documentation, which was in the talk before also a topic. This is especially necessary if you work with other people. But if you're on your own, you have workflows, I think. I think least people have it documented as well. This might exist, but it's not so necessary for this daily routine. If you do a research project, it's crucial because then you can reconstruct your processes years after you did the research. So that's another story. But for your personal business, then I think it's unusual that you document your workflow, but you have them anyway, and most of them are embodied. So it's in your body knowledge, body memory, like in your fingers when you tip, and so on and so on. So for me personally, like I said, we always have workflows in our daily work. Explicit workflows I do also have, or especially in the context of the academy in Mainz and the projects I'm working on, because there it is very crucial that we have some standardized ways of tasks which come along regularly on a regular basis. I don't know if does it.
Yeah, that makes total sense, and
okay.
it's actually quite interesting because when we spoke about, so the Digital Academy of this year is linked to the so-called Flow project. And the Flow project sort of is interested in building workflows for digital humanities projects that deal with the task of digitizing handwritten material of pre-modern underrepresented languages. And then there's lots of sort of steps involved that also navigate between my personal interests and skills and the technologies that I'm planning on using. And I think that in the digital humanities, this kind of the human machine interaction part of these workflows would be something interesting to also speak about a little bit more. But let me first get back to the idea that you proposed that everyone has their own workflows, even in day-to-day work. And I think this is then sort of the third level, right? So you have a personal level of this is how I work. And then you have a project and a project team, like the Flow project, where you have to kind of organize specific workflows. And then you have the project management and knowledge about how to build workflows. And I think this is really interesting that we kind of cover all of these three levels. So it was really good that you kind of pointed this out. And it made me think of my own color codes and taking notes. I tend to use sort of different colored pencils to highlight things that kind of have different categories in my mind. But anyway, so let's not get too deep into the disorganization of my own personal workflows. But when we thought about this summer school, the Digital Academy, what we had in mind was how do we build workflows that are maybe standardized, as you said, but also focus on the interoperability, and also like, is there such a thing as a generalized workflow? Can we come up with something that every researcher or every person in the Age project should kind of think about? Would you think that there is such a thing, or is it more individual or more specific to the tasks and goals that you have in mind?
That's a very good question. So I think so what I see, even if we have categories of somewhat similar projects, my impression is that every project is very, very unique. It's not just about the research question, it's about the output, it's about the project team, it's about the duration, the financing, the roles, and so on, the institutional backgrounds of the people. So I think that is very, very unique and specific for each project. But I think there are some key stages, and I think that was the term that you used in your question. Key stages, on, well, obviously a very general level. But I think they are worth pointing out because I think workflows are not constructs you are beginning with. I think they are building upon something. And I think at the very first stage, which really should be given, especially when we talk about very interdisciplinary projects, and the humanities projects are usually interdisciplinary and big interdisciplinary, not just chemistry and physics, but also informatics and art history or history and so on. And I think the first crucial step would be to have a solid team spirit, that you have a group of people who are working together, and the fundament is respect for each other and for their researchers. Maybe that sounds trivial, but if you don't have a keen eye on that, this has effects, especially when you have a project which takes a couple of years. You can recognize this. And I think this should be the solid basis that people, they don't need necessarily a complete understanding of each other's backgrounds, but to have this ground truth of we're working together, and I respect you, and you do a respected way of research, and what you do for your research is solid. And I think this is the ground where you can build workflows on, because workflows are a tool. And if the group cannot work with each other, you won't find any tool to fix this. So the social problems go before every technical problem. So I think this would be the very first stage, the team spirit. The second would be to have a clear understanding what the actual task is. Yes, you have a project proposal. Yes, that's right. But between the project proposal and how you're doing things and what the actual tasks are and who is concerned with this, there's a huge gap. And this is good, actually, because it leaves space to apply these proposals and the plans to your particular situation. So this is a good thing to have some space. This gives you the meta tasks, so to speak, to sort out who is responsible for what and for what tasks, and what the tasks actually are, which have to be done. The third stage would be, if you've clarified this, where are differences in doing the same task? So different people do the same task in a different way. And we have that, for example, when you work on keywords, for example. If you have to classify things, you can talk a lot about this, but in the end, if two different people put their labels and their keywords on things, books, tickets, whatever, it will be different. It's somewhat like the inter-annotator agreement and so on, and so on, which is in editions, for example, an issue. And it is not wrong to talk about this in advance, but it is not sufficient. So you have to do this, and then to compare your results, and then to talk about it, and to detect the differences, and then to say, okay, we're doing this differently. What do you think? Should we do it that way or this way? And then to document this, and to agree on how to do this in general. So I think this is the third stage. And the fourth would be to fix these workflows, to also document them in a way that people can understand this documentation, and to integrate it into an onboarding process, and to have some sort of meta workflow. So how to change the workflows, because It is good to standardize these things, but if it's 100% solid and never to change, you will get problems with this. It shouldn't be changed every time, so it's something in between. It's solid and stable and has to be flexible as well on the same time. And you need a process to work upon these workflows and to change them if it's necessary to do so. So I think, but this is these are very tentative thoughts, but this would make sense for very abstract perspective on project management.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I really like the idea, and I think this is something that also oftentimes happens anyway, but I think it's good to make it explicit that it's sort of a gradient between being stable and also, workflows can be used for stabilization, but also the necessity to keep it as flexible as necessary to sort of make certain adjustments. And I think it's good to sort of think about this and talk about this, and not only, even for documentation, I think it would be good to say, okay, these are sort of the stabilizing factors, but make sure that you have also room for reshaping certain steps of the workflow, or leave room for evaluating mistakes and then make adjustments and these kinds of things. And I think this is really important to sort of have this in the back of your mind. And it basically leads me. Oh, sorry. Did you want to jump in?
I just wanted to add one point on that, because we have a recursive moment there. Because to think about the workflows, to maintain them and so on, it's a task in itself. And so you have this circular movement, which you could read up in system theory. Or you will know that something's missing if you don't have a concept for this. But it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and it also feeds back into this idea of doing things iteratively and, kind of, circular always feels like it's not going anywhere. So, it's always like a weird sort of, not weird, but maybe not always very productive sort of metaphor to think about this. But yeah, so I totally agree. You need to have feedback loops and recursive thinking and all that kind of thing in workflows. So maybe I can dwell a little bit more on the implicit-explicit thing, because you also, in your opening statements, you sort of made this an issue. And we had a question on how the talk about workflows and thinking about workflows influences transparency, which I would sort of put into the corner of the explicitness or making things explicit. So would you say that on a practical level, workflows help with documentation and with transparency and explicitness, but also kind of the publishing, thinking about workflows and the influence of workflows on our academic work also kind of heightens the chance of reproducibility, for example?
Yes, yes, I personally do think so, that this is a crucial topic, and I think you could put that into the corner of open science and open methodology. I think this is a crucial topic. I mean, I think we have to differentiate here between workflows which are only for internal. There might be good reasons for this. For example, with NFDI for Culture, we have also a help desk structure, and within the help desk, the legal help desk, which deals with legal issues from projects, and they really have to keep an eye on privacy and stuff like that. So it's hard for them to get more transparent. But these are exceptions, I think. Usually, I think you could publish a lot of the workflows you have in your projects, and to make them transparent if we talk about project management. Like I said, projects are unique, so I don't think that you will find a workflow, even if it's published, that you can apply 100% on your project. I don't think that's possible, but you can get inspired, of course. And you can see, okay, how do other people do this? How do they deal with this problem? Or which, don't know, aspects of this workflow did they that they think of, we didn't think of, and so on. So I think this could be productive, and to publish these things more. Like I said, in the context of open methodology. But if, and this is coming from the corner of knowledge management, when I imagine the situation that a lot of digital humanities projects publish their workflows on Zenodo, okay, but what do we do with this? We cannot search for it. So I think if you really want to make use of these experiences and these documented and published workflows for transparent reasons, I think there should be another way. That could mean a platform or a search system, something like that, a registry or whatever, where you collect them and where you have the opportunity to do some searches on this to get an overview if you want to have one, because otherwise, like I said, the things are published, but you don't have a central search system for this. So it's still very steered by chance, so to speak. So serendipity, if that works or not. But like I said, that is what I think when it comes to project management workflows. Another topic, and I don't know if you wanted to go in this direction as well, is when you think about workflows for research projects, because then when we talk about research processes, then the necessities to document are on a different level, I think, because then you have to be transparent due to the gute wissenschaftliche Praxis, good scientific practice, to be reproducible and to give people the opportunity to look into your into your data and into your processes to assess on the quality of the claims you make based on your research.
Yeah. And if I may, because I know you work at the Academy of Sciences and Literature and Minds, and you have contact with a lot of different people from a lot of different projects, in very different stages of familiarity with digital tools in the humanities. So from that point of view, do you think, like, what happens if people would, like, for example, I plan on publishing a paper on medieval court records, whatever, and I include a chapter on this is my workflow. Is that something that people would find weird in your experience? Because when I talk to more, we always call them traditional, which is also weird. But, people who are not so familiar with sort of the way that digital humanists think about stuff, they always tend to have this moment of, I don't know. I don't know whether I want to do this. Because if I talk too much about the way that I work, then maybe other people will take something away from me. This also, of course, has something to do with data publication and when do I share the things that sort of came out of different stages of my research process. Do you think this is something? So is there a limit to the productivity of explicitness when you think about humanities research? I know it's a complicated question, but you're a philosopher, so I'm sure you have an answer to that.
Or I could know that I don't know. To make this reference. No, I think it depends. So I have no definite opinion on the transparency in research in general, because there is one side who says, okay, I'm afraid people are stealing my ideas from me, even from reviewing processes, for example, and so and stuff like that. But there are other people, for example, Mareike König, with her scientific blogging, who says, no, the different, it's the opposite. If you make it transparent, you can have a good argument that you were working on this topic and with these data and so on. So it's a safety opportunity for oneself. I'm actually very unsure about this. But your other question headed in the direction of what could be a good way of including the so-called traditional humanists into digital infrastructures and working environments and digital methods. This is a very hard question to tackle, and I think this is a question for a lot of years already. Yeah, I think it could be one part of solving this issue, because there are people you won't reach because they don't want to.
Sure.
So it doesn't matter which bridge you build or what kind of transparency you do. It doesn't matter because they don't want to. Okay. And there are other people who are very open towards digital methods, and you don't have to reach them as well because they are very motivated and open, and they are learning on a high speed and so on. The interesting people are those who say, okay, I have no idea what you are doing there with your digital tools, but I would like to learn. And I think you need a mix of measures for these people to make your workflows for your actual research, for your concrete research transparent is one means. And one option. I don't think that it's enough. It's not sufficient. You do also need some other media and knowledge transferring structures. So, for example, video tutorials and guidelines and something like that. But, and this is one of my experiences in the NFDI for Culture help desk, the material, so the explicit, the documented knowledge, the codified knowledge, which is called that way in the knowledge management community, is good, but it's still not sufficient because people want to have someone human. I'm not sure if that changes due to ChatGPT and other chatbots. My experience is they want a human who they can talk to, and to whom they can say, okay, this is my research, this is my problem, I've tried this and that, I've read this, I know of this guideline, I've watched this video, but I'm still stuck, and can you give me an assessment on this? So we have a very, very high frequency in our help desk with these questions, even if a lot of times the material is published, you can read how to do things. Guidelines, workflows, not in particular, but various topics, but people still want someone to explain it to them, which is all right. We are in a transformation phase currently.
Yeah, and I think, I kind of share the experience that talking to people, giving them examples also from your own experience is still the best way to enable them then to make the decision, do I want to do a digital project or not? Because I always feel that it's important to say it's okay if you don't. there are projects, where it doesn't make sense. As with any other sort of theoretical framework or a methodological framework, there are projects where, the one makes more sense than the other.
Yes.
And there are projects where digital approaches, which in a nutshell for me are often quantitative, data-oriented methods, make sense for some projects, and for some
Yes.
it's just not, a sensible task. And I think that this also belongs to building workflows, is to identify moments of decision making. So from one sort of step, you also gave us these 6 sort of key phases of projects or building workflows or whatever. And in my view, workflows also have to do with decision making. So would you agree? And do you think that there are some relatable, crucial moments or crucial decisions that people have to be aware of?
Yes, I think that's a very good point, and maybe this could even be the bridge to infrastructures, because decisions does not necessarily have the shape of a text, a written decision, a law, or something like that. It can also be a material form, like a tool or
exactly, yeah,
a digital working environment, a program, or whatever, because these are results of decisions, and they make life easier because you don't have to think about these decisions, but they also give you some new options of resistance. So if you want to do something which is not foreseen or thought of, then it can be very hard. And these are 2 different cases. If you have a verbal agreement or a law, a statement, a regulation, or whatever, and you have a particular complex situation, and you say, okay, I know of these rules, but I cannot apply to them because of this and that reason, and then one can find a way around or something like that. With hardware and software, and if it's programmed, you cannot do that. You cannot argue with your program because it won't do it what you want it to do. Even it doesn't matter what you say. So that's a different case. I don't know if that's a good answer for your question about the decision.
I just wanted to sort of think about that a little, because that was one of the things that we thought about in the Digital Academy of this year as well. Is there points where you kind of decide, okay, do I do digital, yes or no? If yes, next question would be, do I have data resources that I can reuse? Yes or no? If no, what parts of the sort of actual project workflow can I use or what kind of tools or what kind of, steps can I take to then achieve okay, now I have the data resources, what do I do next? And I think this is another way of sort of imagining workflows. I don't know, not every project works like this,
like
but
a
I
decision
think,
tree, you mean?
Yeah. But I think in the realm of digital humanities, some of the projects do work like that, or at least, if you prepare what you want to do, there are parts of the workflow that kind of could be imagined as a decision tree.
I think that does make sense. I would just also point out that it would be, I think this could be a trap of misconception if you say, okay, I don't do digital methods, I don't have any data or digital tools in my project, because I think, and like you said, I come from philosophy, and most of the community is still very traditional. So this claim, we don't have any data, it is not true, actually. It is not true. And I mean, if you don't have a digital, well, maybe we have to differentiate between a digital components you're working with and research data. For example, maybe this differentiation makes sense because I'm pretty sure that even people who say we don't have data in philosophy don't use a typewriter to write the text. They're using a computer, so they have data. And maybe that is some thought to keep in mind. You can decide, okay, in my particular situation, digital methods don't make sense, but that doesn't mean that you don't have any digital components or need a research data management plan or have to think about knowledge and skills you need to make use of digital tools you need. And even if it's just something like Zotero for your literature data, something like that.
Yeah, right. I mean, I am convinced that in the 21st century, you cannot do humanities research in a non-digital way.
Exactly.
It always has, as you said, some kind of digital component, which is why I also like to think that the differentiation that you just made opened up is really important to say, what does digital humanities, what is the core that differentiates this group of people and what they do? And maybe I should speak for myself as a digital history person. What is the specificity of digital history is I work with data in the sense of sort of research data and data, like datafied texts. So I always try to tell people that I have a different object. I don't only do text anymore, but I do different things with sort of the datafied version of text. So I think it's really, I just wanted to sort of support that. It's really important to sort of differentiate the two, whether it's a digital medium or a digital platform, or whether it's actual data-based or data-oriented research.
I mean, there is this small scientific ethnographic study by Antonievich from the States. It's just a very small book published a couple of years ago, and she differentiates between a digital humanist and a digital scholar in the humanities. And with second, he means exactly this. You are not applying digital methods in your domain, but of course you're working digital. I mean, we're Zooming. I'm writing my text and so on. So it's very counterintuitive to say I am not digital.
And even the notion of workflow, and I think this is something that you also pointed out, is that when you talked about the personal workflows, we might not call it a workflow, but we all have a set of things that we usually do when we try to solve a certain task. And even, you went as far back as Descartes, who already knew this. So, there's nothing new really about this. Okay, so maybe we go back to, because now we kind of, followed our own discussion and picked up on some things in your answers. But maybe let's go back to the topic of workflows. And, I already asked you about whether or not there is such a thing as a standardized modular workflow, and we talked a little bit about this. But what is your experience? Do you think that there are workflows? What would be lessons learned that you would like to sort of put out there about workflows or about designing workflows? Maybe even from an infrastructure perspective, because we've got these different experiences.
A couple of things we already said. So, for example, that it's a mixture of stability and flexibility. But also, I think it's important to keep in mind that a workflow is some sort of standard, but that does just apply to standardized tasks. If we do research, we do a non-standardized task by definition. We do something new. We try to find out something which we don't know, or we try to solve a problem where we don't know how to resolve it yet. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to think about it. We can just solve it. So, and there you have, you have a lot of workflows where you are embedded in to deal with this problem, but the problem itself, it's not standardized. So if you do research, you cannot use at this point workflows because it's by definition not standardized. This would be one idea. The other thing would be you can try to anticipate things in your project, and it's good to do so, but you shouldn't forget that you cannot anticipate everything. So workflows need to grow. Does it make sense? It needs to grow from the group which ought to use them. So they need some time and so on, because you can start a new project and you maybe don't know exactly at the very beginning what the tasks are, but some tasks you can anticipate. Well, we need a social media person, and we need documentation, and so on and so on. But I don't have the impression, if you have a list with these questions at the very beginning and you find an answer, that 2 or 3 months later it's still the same. I don't think that's this is the case. So you also need to it's some sort of dialectical process, if you like. So you need to do something and then to talk again with each other, and then you make the first draft of a workflow, and then you work again and then change it, and so on and so on. But that needs to grow in a way. And this is, I think, also a reason why these workflows are not directly applicable to other projects, because they are so specific to the projects and the individual situation of the project. Another thing would be most workflows and also projects, if you think them as a whole, they imply that towards the end you have some sort of cleaning up. This is a crucial point, especially for knowledge management, because, like I said, one project ends, the next starts somewhere, and there's a lot of knowledge lost. But it's very crucial to really do these cleanup processes, to save your files, and to do some lessons learned, and to do some expert debriefing, and to do some best practices, and so on, because this is a very valuable resource and it gets lost if you don't do this. And this is also true in smaller things, and even for the personal knowledge management, for example. So the end of the process is very crucial. I know that in reality you don't have just one project, and when it ends, then the next project comes and leaves you the space to do it in a comfortable manner, in a comfortable way. It's pretty much more chaotic. Yes, that's true, but it's nonetheless important to have an eye on this. Yeah, I took some notes. I just take a look at them. And yeah, like I said, I think one of the most important points is to keep in mind that workflows are a tool, and if a group wants to use these tools, then the group as a group has to work fine. They need to have a good group spirit, because otherwise it won't work. You cannot compensate. I know that sometimes this is a strategy. If a project if a group cannot work together as well, then sometimes it's a strategy to do more formalization and to give a workflow and to say, okay, do it that way, and then we can avoid some frictions and conflicts. I don't know if that works. So I like to think of workflows as tools which build upon a good team spirit, and the social situation comes before this. Yes, that I would say are for me, at least one more of the most important points.
Thank you so much. And I think it really highlights your last point that in the interview with Anna Neubert, this was also one of the most important takeaways, that the group has to work and that there's sort of the social interactions and people feel seen and heard and, you know, put to work in a good way, and they feel that they can contribute, that this is really essential. I think even stresses the point how important this is. I'm going to ask you one last question in this more kind of scripted interview, and then I will open the floor for more questions if there are any. And this last question, so-called last question, is kind of the reverse to what we just discussed, because one of your last points was that workflows have to be seen as tools, which I totally agree upon. And then they have to be adapted to certain situations. But could you think of an example, either from your own experience or sort of more generally, where a workflow changed the question? So is there, you know, because your examples were more like research questions, lead the way, and then the workflow follows. Have you ever had a situation where sticking to a certain workflow actually opened up a totally new pathway or a new question? Or can you think of instances in which that would also be possible?
With a question, you mean in a
research interest
project,
or a project
question.
Or maybe even like a partial question. You know, nobody changes the general outlook of a project because of a workflow, but maybe certain steps in a workflow can actually help change perspectives or open up new pathways. Would you think that this is also a possibility?
I have actually not so much experience with this question. I think this can happen. I just wanted to point out that I don't think that the question is at the very beginning. So I think this model of we have a research question and then what I meant earlier are basically about infrastructural kind of work. But if you do research with an open ending, in my opinion, the research question is actually a part of the results. So I think you start with a question, but this is not the question you will have in the end, because the question has to develop as well. So because you can, maybe you might know this, but I'm dealing with the notion of questions in my dissertation. So if you need to know something if you want to ask something. So you need to have a lot of knowledge to ask the right question, and usually this is towards the end of a project. So the actual research question is part of the results. You have to start with some sort of vague question, yes, of course, but it has to develop as well. And maybe this is some sort of co-creation or co-evolution or co-development between the workflows. I can imagine of the situations where you get new ideas of your research if you have explicit workflows or apply workflows, or stick to, like we said, materialized workflows in form of software, for example, and the options you have there. This would be some sort of occasionalism, which was described by Karin Knort-Cetina in her laboratory studies. This is, of course, a huge factor. I mean, you can think of a perfect research project, but it depends a lot on your situation, the literature you have in reach, the people you can talk to, the software you can use, licenses, money, and so on and so on. These are very contingent factors. So I think you can get occasions and chances if you stick to certain workflows. but the opposite might also be true. So I think sometimes if you want to stick to your research intuition and you want to develop your question in a different direction, then workflows can be in the way as well. So I think I would like to think of it as some sort of co-creation. Everything is in flux, so to speak.
Thank you very much. I think, and also for that maybe even reassuring take on the question is allowed to change.
Yes.
I remember during my when I did my PhD, I always, like, the first year I was really struggling because I had a question and I kind of had the feeling that I had to stick to that question. And I think it's very, and then obviously I didn't. But, I think it's really reassuring to hear also for some people in the room and outside that it's totally normal and even part of the research process to, in the very end, know what the question was supposed to be, and then sort of reorganize your research towards that particular question that you only see in the end. So thank you for that.
Yes, of course. And this is also not new. It's known as the Menon problem from the Platonic dialogue Menon. How do I look for something I don't know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so this is exactly this. And I think this model, you have the question, you make a plan, you do the plan, and then you have your result. I don't even know if I would like that to be that way. I think that would be boring.
Yeah, and I think, some of the surplus of humanities is that it doesn't have to be like that.
Yes.
Because, we are on a journey with most of our research projects, and then we will see where it leads us, more or less. But, it always has ups and downs to sort of every kind of perspective. Some people might like to have a certain plan and be reassured that if I stick to the plan, then everything will be fine in the end. So you never know. Okay, Jonathan, thank you so much so far. Thank you for answering all my complicated questions. Thank you again, Jonathan, and everybody else.